The thunder of hooves echoed across the barren landscape as Sophia Reynolds galloped desperately toward the swollen river, her heart pounding in time with her horse's frantic pace. The spring rains had transformed the normally docile crossing into a churning mass of murky water and debris, but turning back meant certain death at the hands of the bandits, who had already burned her family's homestead to the ground. Sophia reined her exhausted mare to a halt at the riverbank, dismounting quickly as her gaze searched frantically for any safe passage across. The water roared menacingly, far too deep and swift for any sensible person to attempt crossing. The cool April air of 1878 whipped around her, catching her auburn hair and the fabric of her modest dress as she stood paralyzed with indecision. "Not a day for swimming, miss," called a deep voice from behind her. Sophia spun around, her hand instinctively reaching for the small pistol concealed in her pocket. A tall figure on horseback approached slowly, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, she could make out a weather-beaten face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, kind eyes evaluating her predicament with concern. "I mean no harm," he said, raising his hands slightly. "Name's Henry Addison. Most folks call me Hank." "Sophia Reynolds," she replied cautiously, not releasing her grip on the concealed weapon. "And I need to cross this river today, Mr. Addison. Waiting is not an option." Henry dismounted, leading his horse closer. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something reassuring in his steady gaze that made Sophia's guard lower slightly. "Those men chasing you," he said quietly. "They're Lawson's gang, aren't they?" Sophia's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Saw the smoke from your family's place. Been tracking them for 3 days." His jaw tightened. "I'm a deputy marshal out of Fort Collins. Been after Lawson since he killed my partner last month." "They murdered my father," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "Took everything we had. I barely escaped with my life." Henry nodded grimly. "Then we both have reason to get across this river and continue west. They'll be here within the hour." He studied the churning waters. "There's a crossing point about a quarter-mile downstream. It's dangerous but possible with the right approach." "Show me," Sophia demanded, gathering her horse's reins. The deputy led her downstream to where the river widened slightly. The crossing still looked treacherous, but Henry pointed to a barely visible path of stones beneath the water's surface. "It's an old trader's crossing. The water's higher than usual, but it's our best chance." He turned to her with a grave expression. "Stay close to me." The current's strong enough to sweep away both horse and rider. Sophia's mare whinnied nervously as they approached the water's edge. The river lapped at the animal's hooves, causing it to back away skittishly. "She senses the danger," Henry observed. "How strong a swimmer are you, Miss Reynolds?" "Strong enough," Sophia replied, though uncertainty clouded her eyes. Henry dismounted again and approached her. "We'll cross together. My horse is steadier in water. Leave your mare here, she'll likely follow once we're across." Sophia hesitated, then nodded, slipping down from her saddle. She secured her few remaining possessions in her saddlebags and whispered soothingly to her horse before releasing the reins. Henry led his mount to the water's edge and climbed into the saddle, then extended his hand down to Sophia. "You'll ride with me. It's safer that way." She placed her hand in his, feeling the strength in his calloused fingers as he pulled her up behind him. The horse moved forward cautiously, testing each step as they entered the river. Cold water immediately soaked through Sophia's boots and the hem of her dress. "Hold tight," Henry instructed as the water deepened and the current grew stronger. Sophia wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him against the chill of the river. The horse moved steadily forward, finding the submerged path with remarkable surety. The water rose higher, soon reaching Sophia's waist, then her chest. Her skirt billowed out around her in the current, threatening to pull her from the horse. "We're nearly halfway," Henry called over the roar of the water. "The worst part is just ahead." Suddenly, the horse stumbled on the slippery rocks beneath, lurching sideways. Sophia felt herself slipping, her grip on Henry loosening as the current caught her dress like a sail. Before she could cry out, she was in the water, the river swallowing her in its icy embrace as it carried her downstream. She fought against the current, struggling to keep her head above water as her sodden clothing dragged her down. Through the spray, she glimpsed Henry urging his horse toward the far bank before dismounting and plunging back into the water after her. Sophia managed to grasp an outcropping of rock, clinging desperately as the river surged around her. Her arms ached with the effort of holding on, her fingers growing numb from the cold. "Hold on." Henry's voice carried over the water as he fought his way toward her, powerful strokes cutting through the current. Just as her strength began to fail, his hand closed around her wrist. The river rose around her skirt, threatening to tear her away, but the cowboy took her hand and said, "You'll cross beside me." With remarkable strength, he pulled her against the current, guiding her toward a shallower section where they could gain footing. Step by treacherous step, they moved together across the river, Henry's arm firm around her waist, his body shielding her from the worst of the current. When they finally reached the opposite bank, they collapsed together on the muddy shore, gasping for breath. Sophia's mare had indeed followed and stood nearby, shaking water from its coat. "Thank you," Sophia managed between breaths, suddenly aware of how close they were. "You saved my life." Henry nodded, rising to his feet and helping her up. "We need to keep moving." Lawson's men won't be deterred by a river for long. They rode double on Henry's horse until nightfall, with Sophia's mare following behind. As darkness settled over the landscape, they found shelter in a small grove of cottonwoods nestled against a rocky outcropping. "We should be safe enough here for the night," Henry said, dismounting and helping Sophia down. "I'll get a small fire going. You need to get dry before you catch your death." Sophia shivered, her damp clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. "I have a spare dress in my saddlebags." Henry nodded, turning away to give her privacy. "I'll see to the horses." As he moved away, Sophia retrieved her spare clothing and changed quickly behind a cluster of rocks. The dry fabric felt heavenly against her chilled skin, though it did little to erase the memory of Henry's strong arms around her in the river. When she returned to their makeshift camp, Henry had a small, well-contained fire burning and was laying out jerky and hardtack from his provisions. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll keep our strength up." "It's more than I expected to have today," Sophia replied, settling beside the fire. "This morning I thought I might not live to see evening." They ate in companionable silence for a while, the crackle of the fire and distant call of night birds the only sounds. Finally, Sophia spoke. "You said you've been tracking Lawson's gang. Is it just you?" "No other deputies," Henry's expression darkened. "The marshal couldn't spare more men. Most lawmen won't cross into this territory anyway, too dangerous, they say." "But you did." "Lawson killed my partner," Henry replied simply. "Good men don't let that stand." Sophia studied him in the firelight. "What will you do when you find them? Bring them to justice if I can." "Dead or alive?" His eyes met hers. "What about you? Where were you headed when I found you?" "My aunt lives in Silver Creek, about 3 days' ride west of here. She's the only family I have left now." Sophia looked down at her hands. "I was supposed to visit last spring, but Father needed help with the farm. If I'd gone then." "Don't," Henry said gently. "That kind of thinking will eat you alive, trust me." Something in his voice made Sophia look up. "You've lost someone too, my wife and son. Influenza 3 years ago." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I became a lawman after that. Seemed as good a way as any to make some sense of a senseless world." Sophia reached across the space between them and placed her hand on his arm. "I'm sorry." Henry nodded, covering her hand with his own for a brief moment before pulling away. "We should get some rest. I'll take first watch." "Wake me in a few hours," Sophia insisted. "You need sleep too." He smiled for the first time, a genuine expression that transformed his solemn face. "Yes, madam." The night passed uneventfully, and they set out at first light, making good time across the rolling prairie. Henry taught Sophia to watch for signs of pursuit, explaining how to read tracks and recognize disturbances in the landscape that might indicate danger. "You're a quick study," he observed as she correctly identified a deer trail crossing their path. "My father taught me to hunt," she explained, "said a woman on the frontier should know how to provide for herself." Wise man, he was. Sophia's voice softened. "He came west after my mother died, hoping to build something new for us. He worked so hard on that farm. We'll make sure his death wasn't for nothing," Henry promised. "Lawson will face justice." By midday, they spotted a plume of dust on the horizon behind them. "Riders," Henry confirmed grimly after studying the distant cloud through his field glass. "At least 4 of them, moving fast. Lawson, most likely. We need to find cover." They pushed their horses hard, aiming for a line of rocky hills that promised potential hiding places. As they reached the first rise, Henry suddenly reined in his horse. "There," he pointed to a narrow gap between 2 rock formations. "That might be our best chance." They urged their mounts through the gap, finding themselves in a small box canyon with steep walls on 3 sides. A trickle of water ran down one rock face, feeding a small pool. "It's a dead end," Sophia observed anxiously. "It's defensible," Henry countered, dismounting and leading his horse deeper into the canyon. "And they might ride past if we're lucky." They secured the horses at the back of the canyon, then Henry led Sophia to a position behind a cluster of boulders near the entrance. He handed her his spare revolver. 6 shots, he said. "Make them count if it comes to that." The weight of the gun felt both foreign and familiar in Sophia's hand. She'd fired her father's pistol before, but never at a person. "I don't know if I can. These men murdered your father and burned your home," Henry reminded her quietly. "They won't hesitate to do worse to you. Remember that." They waited in tense silence as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Sophia's heart hammered in her chest, her palms slick with sweat against the gun's handle. Henry's presence beside her was reassuring, his steady breathing a counterpoint to her own rapid pulse. The riders slowed as they neared the gap in the rocks. Through a small opening between boulders, Sophia could see 4 men on horseback, dusty and hard-faced. She recognized one as the man who had shot her father. "Tracks lead this way," one of the men called. "They must have gone through here." "Coulda doubled back," another suggested. "This looks like a trap waiting to happen." The apparent leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, considered the gap thoughtfully. "Jenkins, Fisher, check it out. Carson and I will cover you." 2 of the riders dismounted, drawing their weapons as they cautiously approached the entrance to the canyon. Sophia's finger tightened on the trigger, her breath caught in her throat. Henry placed a steadying hand on her arm and whispered, "Not yet." The men were nearly at the entrance when a rattlesnake slithered out from between the rocks, startling the lead man. He fired reflexively, the shot echoing off the canyon walls. "Damn it, Jenkins," the leader shouted. "You trying to bring down the whole mountain?" "Snake," Jenkins replied defensively. "Nearly stepped on the bastard." The unexpected gunshot had spooked the horses, causing a momentary distraction. Henry seized the opportunity, firing 2 quick shots that dropped Jenkins and sent the others scrambling for cover. "There they are." Carson yelled, returning fire as he dove behind a boulder. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around Sophia and Henry, sending stone splinters flying. Henry fired methodically, forcing the bandits to keep their heads down. 3 bullets left, he murmured to Sophia. "When I tell you, I need you to provide covering fire while I move to that position there." He nodded toward another cluster of rocks that would give him a better angle. Sophia nodded, her mouth dry with fear. "Now." Henry commanded, and Sophia rose slightly, firing 2 shots toward the bandits' position as Henry sprinted across the open ground. A cry told her at least 1 shot had found its mark. The leader, Lawson, she presumed cursed viciously. "Carson's hit," he shouted. "Fisher, circle around." Henry reached his new position safely and signaled for Sophia to hold her fire. They watched as Fisher attempted to work his way up the canyon wall to get a better angle. "He's mine," Henry whispered, taking careful aim before squeezing the trigger. Fisher tumbled down the rocky slope, landing in a motionless heap. There was a moment of silence before Lawson called out, "Addison? I know it's you, lawman, just the two of us now. Give yourself up, Lawson," Henry replied. "There's nowhere to run." Lawson's laugh was harsh. Says the man pinned down in a box canyon. "You've got a woman with you, don't you? The Reynolds girl. How long before you run out of bullets, deputy?" Henry glanced at Sophia, raising his eyebrows in silent question. She held up 3 fingers to indicate her remaining bullets, then pointed at herself and made a circling motion, suggesting she could try to flank Lawson. Henry shook his head firmly, unwilling to risk her safety. Instead, he pointed to the horses at the back of the canyon and mimed riding away. Sophia understood immediately he wanted her to escape while he held Lawson off. She shook her head vehemently, refusing to abandon him. Before they could resolve their silent argument, Lawson made his move, charging toward their position with guns blazing. Henry pushed Sophia down behind the rocks, returning fire as bullets whined around them. In the chaos, Sophia saw her opportunity. While both men were focused on each other, she slipped away from the boulder and circled behind another rock formation, approaching Lawson from his blind side. The bandit leader was so intent on Henry that he didn't notice Sophia until she was 20 feet away. She raised her pistol with both hands to steady it, just as her father had taught her. "Lawson," she called. The bandit spun toward her, raising his gun, but Sophia was faster. She fired twice in rapid succession. The first shot went wide, but the second struck Lawson in the chest. He staggered backward, surprise evident on his face before collapsing to the ground. Henry rushed forward, kicking Lawson's gun away before checking for signs of life. "He's dead," he confirmed, looking up at Sophia with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That was incredibly brave, and incredibly foolish." "I couldn't let you die for me," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in her limbs. Henry holstered his weapon and approached her slowly, as if afraid she might bolt like a frightened deer. When he reached her, he gently took the pistol from her hands and drew her into his arms. Sophia didn't resist, suddenly overcome by delayed shock as the reality of what she'd done crashed over her. "It's over," Henry murmured against her hair. "You're safe now." They remained like that for several long minutes, Sophia drawing strength from his solid presence. When she finally pulled away, she found the courage to meet his eyes. "What happens now?" "Now we take Lawson's body to the nearest town and collect the bounty," Henry replied. "Then I escort you safely to your aunt's place in Silver Creek." They gathered the outlaw's horses and weapons, securing Lawson's body across his saddle. By nightfall, they had reached the small settlement of Willow Bend, where the local sheriff confirmed Lawson's identity and arranged for the bounty payment. $500, the sheriff announced, counting out the money. "You've done this territory a great service, Deputy Addison." "Miss Reynolds deserves half," Henry insisted. "She's the one who took the final shot." The sheriff raised his eyebrows but didn't argue, dividing the money between them. They spent the night at the town's modest hotel in separate rooms that shared a connecting door. Despite her exhaustion, Sophia found sleep elusive, the day's events replaying in her mind. A soft knock at the connecting door startled her. "Sophia, are you awake?" "Yes," she replied, wrapping a shawl around her nightdress before opening the door. Henry stood there, still fully dressed, concern evident in his expression. "I heard you pacing, thought you might want company." "I keep seeing his face," Sophia admitted, "the moment I shot him." "The first one stays with you," Henry said quietly. "It never gets easier, nor should it. Taking a life, even one that deserves ending, changes something in you." "Do you regret becoming a lawman?" Henry considered this. "No. There's satisfaction in knowing I've prevented good people from suffering at the hands of men like Lawson. But there are nights when the faces of those I've killed visit me." He gave her a gentle smile. "Those nights are getting fewer, though. Life has a way of moving forward, even when we think it might not." Sophia nodded, finding comfort in his words. Will you stay a while, just to talk?" They sat together on the small settee in her room, talking until dawn about their lives before tragedy had altered their paths. Henry spoke of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his migration west after the war, the brief happiness he'd found with his wife and son. Sophia told him about growing up on the frontier, her dreams of someday becoming a teacher, the book she treasured that had been lost in the fire. As sunlight began to filter through the curtains, Henry rose reluctantly. "We should get some rest before we continue to Silver Creek." "Henry," Sophia said, stopping him at the door, "thank you, not just for saving my life but for helping me see that it's still worth living." His smile was worth more than all the bounty money they'd collected. "The pleasure has been mine, Miss Reynolds." The journey to Silver Creek took 2 more days, during which their easy companionship deepened into something more meaningful. They shared stories and laughter, discovered common interests in literature and music, debated politics and philosophy. By the time the small mining town came into view, Sophia found herself wishing the journey could continue indefinitely. Her Aunt Martha welcomed them warmly, insisting Henry stay for dinner after hearing how he had helped her niece. "You're a hero, Deputy Addison," Martha declared as they sat around her dining table. Henry looked embarrassed. "Just doing my duty, madam." "Nonsense. You went above and beyond for Sophia when you could have left her to fend for herself." Martha gave her niece a knowing look. "Good men are rare in these parts." After dinner, Sophia and Henry walked in the small garden behind Martha's house, the evening air fragrant with lilacs that Martha had somehow coaxed to grow in the harsh mountain climate. "I ride out tomorrow," Henry said finally, breaking a comfortable silence. "There's a position open with the territorial marshal's office in Denver. Seems Lawson's capture has improved my standing somewhat." "That's wonderful," Sophia replied, trying to mask her disappointment. "Denver is a fine city from what I've heard." "It is." Henry hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic awkwardness. "I was wondering. That is, I hoped you might consider visiting someday, or perhaps even—" "Perhaps even what, Deputy Addison?" Sophia prompted, her heart quickening. Henry took a deep breath. "I know we've known each other only a few days, but they've been the most important days I've had in years. You've reminded me that there's more to life than chasing outlaws and collecting bounties." He took her hands in his. "I'm not asking for promises, Sophia, just a chance. A chance to see if what I feel for you might grow into something lasting." Sophia looked up at him, at this man who had saved her life and somehow, in the process, saved something in himself as well. "I'd like that very much, Henry." Their first kiss was gentle, a promise rather than a passion, sweet with the possibility of what might come. When they parted, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I'll write to you from Denver," he promised. "And I'll return as soon as I can. I'll be waiting," Sophia replied. True to his word, Henry wrote faithfully. His letters arrived every week, describing his work in Denver, the people he met, the books he read that reminded him of her. Sophia responded with equal devotion, sharing her new life with her aunt, her decision to help at the local school, her growing friendship with the town's residents. 3 months after their parting, a special delivery arrived, not a letter, but a small package containing a silver brooch shaped like a rose and a note that reads simply, "Silver Creek needs a deputy. I've applied for the position. Say you'll have me." When Henry's stagecoach arrived the following week, Sophia was waiting. As he stepped down onto the dusty main street, their eyes met across the crowd, and without hesitation, she ran to him. He caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that spoke louder than words. "Is that a yes?" he asked when he finally set her down. "Yes to being Silver Creek's deputy, or yes to having you?" she teased. "Both," Henry replied, his smile lighting his entire face. "Always both." They were married that autumn in Martha's garden, with the aspen leaves turning gold around them. The town turned out in force to celebrate the union of their new deputy and the schoolteacher's assistant, who had captured his heart. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of late-blooming roses, Sophia thought of the turbulent river that had first brought them together, how the water had risen around her skirt, and how the cowboy had taken her hand and promised she would cross beside him. They had crossed much more than a river since then, navigating grief and violence and uncertainty together. Now, as Henry slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, she knew they would face whatever current's life brought them the same way, side by side, hand in hand, stronger together than either could be alone. Years later, when their own children asked how they had met, Henry would always begin the tale the same way. The river rose around her skirt, and I took her hand and said, "You'll cross beside me." And Sophia would smile, remembering not just the danger they had faced, but the journey that had followed, a journey that had led them through troubled waters to the peaceful shore they now called home. Their life together in Silver Creek unfolded with the changing seasons. Henry proved himself an effective and fair-minded deputy, earning the respect of even the most hardened miners and gamblers who passed through town. Sophia eventually took over the schoolhouse when the aging teacher retired, bringing her love of books and learning to a new generation of frontier children. They built a small house on the edge of town, with a wide porch facing west toward the mountains and the setting sun. In the evenings, they would sit together, watching the alpenglow paint the distant peaks in shades of pink and gold, talking about their day or simply enjoying the comfortable silence they had come to cherish. Their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Henry's mother, arrived in the spring of their second year of marriage. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, William, named for Sophia's father. The children grew strong and curious, surrounded by the wild beauty of the mountains and the love of parents who never took their happiness for granted. Life was not without challenges. The harsh mountain winters tested their endurance, and Henry's duties sometimes placed him in danger. There were lean years when the mines produced less silver and the town's economy suffered. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, just as they had faced the raging river on the day they met hand in hand, neither willing to let the other be swept away. On their 10th anniversary, Henry surprised Sophia by taking her back to the river crossing where they had first met. The water was calm that day, flowing peacefully between grassy banks dotted with wildflowers. "It seems smaller somehow," Sophia observed as they stood hand in hand on the shore. "The dangers we survive often do when we look back on them," Henry replied, squeezing her hand. "But I never forget how close I came to losing you before I'd even found you." Sophia leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I think we were always meant to find each other." Even the river knew it. Henry smiled and drew her into his arms. "Then I'm grateful to that river and to whatever force brought you to its banks that day." "As am I," Sophia whispered against his chest. "As am I." They remained by the river until sunset, watching the golden light transform the landscape, secure in the knowledge that whatever currents life might bring, they would always cross beside each other, two souls who had found, in the wild and unforgiving West, the rarest treasure of all. A love as enduring as the mountains and as life-giving as the river that had brought them together.